Hello, I'm UpYX Toycat, and there's only 3 left. Seriously, after recent updates have added new wood types to lots of different biomes, we now have a wood variation for every major color besides green, as well as purple and black. And you know what dimension is filled with purple and black enemies, as well as mobs? That's right, the End. Mojang could be adding new woods to the End in an End update. This is a popular theory that doesn't come from me, it comes from this Reddit thread with 5,000 upvotes, where all of the top comments seem to agree that this is likely, but despite the fact that we are getting a brand new drop announcement, perhaps the biggest since the drop system began, why is it that an End update is far from a guarantee and not even necessarily likely? Let's go into the case for and against the End update today, starting with the far more fun one, the case for it. So the reason that people have been suggesting an End update is obviously because Jeb himself has said that adding another dimension doesn't make sense until they refine the existing ones. This goes all the way back to 11 years ago from a DreamHack interview, but it's a position that's been reiterated by Mojang many times since. And to be fair, can you blame them? The End is the newest dimension, being added in 2011 for the game's full release, so they could have an Ender Dragon fight, but it truly didn't exist as a dimension until 2016's Combat update. This was the update which took it from just being a single place where you fought a dragon, and also brought in the console-style features, but it took it from being a single island into being a place that was a true dimension that you could explore with outer End lands and even the End city. The first structure and the first true part of Infinite, part of this dimension, all came in 2016, so even though this is the newest dimension, seemingly only by a year, it's actually a full 5 years younger than every other dimension, which is why it feels so much more barren. There are some who would argue this barrenness is a core part of the End, but to those people I would say look at the Never update. Before it happened, the Never used to look solely like this, a barren and hellish dimension, but they added brand new biomes here and they didn't remove the soul of the Never. Indeed, you could argue they actually added it. I think adding all of these new biomes and the new structure actually brought life to the Never, as well as kept all of the old stuff, which is exactly what they could do in the End. You can add new content without having to necessarily ruin your existing stuff, as long as you can keep to somewhat similar of a vibe, just like the Never did. Man, I hate Gus. And so, if the first argument in favour of an End update is that Mojang themselves have admitted they need one, and the second argument is that they've updated many other parts of the game, not just the Nether, but oceans and caves too, every other barren piece of content eventually gets its time, and so will the End as well, is the second argument, but the third is a much more simple one, and it's the crowd pleaser. The most requested Minecraft update is one to the End, and so Mojang should consider it, because sure, they're not a democracy, in fact, they removed the last elements of democracy from their game, but they still have to concede that public opinion is important to them, and if they're putting all of this work into making sure that Minecraft is more multiplayer, not just with the new locator feature, but also by changing the name of the game, then surely you could concede that you could get far more people playing multiplayer Minecraft if you gave them all something to be excited for. Rather than just having to explore the overworld with your friends, why not a whole new dimension to explore? Indeed, there are lots of very populous cases you can make for the End update, but I would actually say that if we make the shift now, these are also big cases against the End update. So to shift into the negative case now, let's talk about one crucial fact about the Never update which made it a bit of a failure, and that is the number of people who actually go to the Never. Sure, you can technically live there, and there's 5 whole biomes, and there's so much content which players like you and me enjoy, and it's the reason why it's a fan favorite update, but the truth is they failed in their goal of getting more players to experience the Never. It hovered somewhere around the 5 to 10% mark before the update, and even now, if we go and check, like we can do, how many players have actually gone into the Nether according to Minecraft achievements? I'm actually gonna have to find out. Let's see. Okay, so after checking the achievement stats for Minecraft for Windows, so keep in mind this will vary from platform to platform, about 1 in 6 Minecraft players, or 17.06%, have constructed a Nether portal, which means they've presumably gone to the Nether. This is actually a big improvement, and it means that sure, 1 in 6 players can enjoy that Nether update, but it also means that, assuming that, let's just say half of players don't play in survival with achievements enabled, but that's, which we can assume from the fact that half of people never got taking your inventory, but if we still assume that means that 1 in 3 players have gone to the Nether, it means 2 in 3 survival players never actually enjoy its content. In fact, the numbers get even more dire because there's an achievement for visiting all of the Nether biomes, and just 5.63% of players have unlocked it. This means that in reality, when they made the the Never update, they made it for Minecraft's 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 players, which is a pretty dire stat to say the least. Whereas, if we take a look at the adventuring time achievement for looking around the overworld, about 42% of players have gotten this, or the overwhelming majority of people who have opened their inventory, so most survival players do explore new biomes. This is why, despite the end needing an update so bad, another update to another niche biome in the overworld seems quite likely, and if I can use one point to drive this point home the strongest, allow me to point out the number of players who have been to the end. It currently sits at 4.94% of gamers, with only 3.88% of those then going on to kill the Ender Dragon. This implies that only about 75% of people can beat the Ender Dragon once going to the end. The rest must die or go to creative or turn on cheats or add-ons or something, and that is fascinating. So if you've ever killed the Ender Dragon, you're in the top 75% of players. That's exciting. Just like how, if you're subscribed to the channel, you're probably in the bottom 99.9% of Housefire havers. But anyway, with that said, it's important to remember the clear distinction between the Minecraft fan base, let's call that, people who are subscribed to channels like this or who use Reddit. The hyper fans of a game are not the majority of its players, and Minecraft does need to, especially if they want to grow the game, not just appeal to all of the players right now, but also appeal to people who aren't even playing yet, and statistically, most of those players aren't going to the end. Would they be drawn in by an end update anyway is an entirely different question, but given Minecraft's track record of not necessarily having fan favorite updates that actually are loved by fans, that's why I think it's not their first call, but I also think they have another key strategy which will distract them from this, and to prove that point, let's go back to the beginning. So the big argument that brought us to this point in the end update is this idea that Mojang keeps adding new wood variants, and so clearly to add a purple or black one, they're going to need to have an end update. But let's analyze the actual first part of that argument for another second, which is that Mojang have added a lot of new wood variants recently. For the first 10 years of Minecraft, where most of the updates happened, there were just 6 types of wood, and then in the last 5 years we've seen another 6 types come in just that time alone. As you can see, this is a drastic increase, and the reason is simple. A new wood type isn't actually that revolutionary, but it does make people very happy. I mean, new wood doesn't actually do anything technically that different. It has the exact same behaviors as the previous woods. Maybe you could argue these two are exceptions, but this variation is really the name of the game in recent Minecraft. Let's take a look at the last 3 updates and say that the spring drop, instead of adding new mobs, it decided to add new mob variants. Let's take a look at the Garden Awakens, where we did get Pale Oak planks, but the Pale Oak tree is just a variant of the Dark Oak tree. Indeed, even the Tricky Trials update, our last major update to add something you might describe as big, a lot of the blocks on that update that made people happy were variants of copper and variants of tough, because this is what people seem to love. I think this is an interesting look about the kind of risk-taking at Mojang. Nowadays, making a risk is something that a lot of people will shun you for, because if it goes poorly, there'll be so much hate from the community, but if you just add a brand new wood variant, like green for azalea or green for a swamp tree, people will go, oh my god, this is amazing. I can do exactly what I did before, where I could have made myself a yellow tree, but now that yellow piece of build will be green instead. The same is true for polished tough. It looks exactly like andesite, but it's grey instead of being white. That is revolutionary if you want to make basically the same thing, but very slightly different. Wow, look at this. This floor between builds here, isn't it so much better now than it was before? Your creative potential has expanded, but in reality, you haven't changed the underlying game mechanics, and this seems to be the name of the game in Minecraft. My biggest argument as to why this shouldn't be the name of the game would be to look at the aquatic update, because we're in an aquarium right now. This used to be a barren place before it, and they added a bunch of mobs at that time, one for each of the, they actually added a lot of mobs based on the 4 fish that existed, 1 variant of cod, 1 variant of pufferfish, 3 variants of salmon, because Mojang has that big salmon energy, and then depending on whether you play Bedrock or Java, 2,700 to 3,000 variants of fish. Now, here's a fun question. Do those extra variants of fish actually add to your enjoyment of them? You know, is that to say, you know, would you say that the salmon is a worse mob or the cod is a worse mob than the tropical fish because there are 3,000 times less of it? No, because regardless of which tropical fish you have, it does more or less the same thing. This is the danger of where Mojang is getting themselves with the core game, where the features that excite people most are just variants of existing ones, and I think that this is something that makes a lot of sense on a year-on-year individual decision, because instead of making a risk, let's say to make a a 15% improvement that risks making the game 5% worse, you'd rather just make the game 3% better and be guaranteed that it will. In other words, Mojang have started playing it safe a little bit, and I think that that has led to a huge bloat in the number of blocks in the game. This is the big reveal for a future video about variants, by the way, so you've got to pretend to be shocked when you see that in the future. Anyway, the idea or the argument here is that Minecraft has been expanding the game quite a bit recently with updates, but they've done so in a way that widens the game, but hasn't necessarily added any depth. More variants of existing blocks allows for more fun ways to do existing things, but crucially, it's been hard for them to add new things to that loop, and I think crucially, every time they try, people actually don't like it. Even though the Pale Gardens came with a creaking, a brand new mechanic we've never seen before, the truth is many more people were just excited about the white wood. Even though the Tricky Trials update came with a brand new structure, one of the coolest new mini bosses we've seen in a while, and all of the content that came along with it, most people were more interested in the new copper variants and maybe at a glance interested in the vaults and stuff like that. But ultimately, Minecraft has been trying for a while to add depth to the game, and people seemingly reject it and ask for, width instead, which is why they've been doing precisely that. However, is that what they should be doing? Well, let's go into the conclusion about whether an end update, or indeed an update of the scale of one, actually is something that is on Mojang's agenda, because this is the conclusion now. Okay, you've heard the arguments for and you've heard the arguments against. What is the actual situation with Mojang updating the end? The answer is they definitely are going to do it at some point. As the rest of the game continues to receive love and care and attention, the end starts to look more and more out of place, and this is something that eventually will have to come to a head. However, it is crucial to note that the at some point part of this means that Mojang are going to do this maybe when it makes more sense for them. I think that the struggle Mojang have had with updating the game is that the consistent formulas that work for them always work for a few years and then need to change. Take for example, the idea of having once a year big updates that update a huge part of the game. These were loved in the Aquatic update, the Never update, and Caves and Cliffs, but started to fall out of favor, and so in the last few years, Mojang has started to change that, and I think the new system of smaller drops is great. This has lots of benefits, but it also makes it much harder for them to ever actually seriously consider updating the end inside one of these, because just 3 months is not really long enough to make a major end update. You could argue this is the perfect time for them to add a bit of end content, and ultimately that new end content would allow more players to go to the end. This is an argument I really like. I mean, in the same way that the Never update improved the number of people going to the Never by quite a large percentage, if only 1 in 10 Minecraft players who have achievements turned on go to the end, and only 75% of those defeat the dragon, so end up going to the End Islands, that means that you have a minuscule 7.5% of your player base who actually explore the existing content, and so if you made more content, you made it even potentially more directed to get people to go to the end, you could encourage more players to explore the existing stuff. This seems to be the big theme that Mojang are actually working on. However, I will say, even though the drop system is incredible in so many ways, I love that we're always excited for the next update. Instead of having huge dead periods where we have no idea what Mojang are working on, we now always see what they're working on, and that tells us what their plans are. And so let's take the first feature inside of the summer drop, which is the new player locator bar. That to me shows that there is a clear emphasis on multiplayer, and one of the places where Mojang is willing to take risks, literally replacing the XP bar with this new player locator, is in making the game more multiplayer. And so here's the question, is the end conducive to better multiplayer? I think that's an open-ended one I'll have to end this video on. You could make a very strong argument that the end is a place that so many people go to in multiplayer. In fact, I did a poll on that one tweeting website, and I found out that shockingly, at least to me, even though I felt like everyone would go to the end by themselves the first time, actually about 37% of people defeat the Ender Dragon with a group or while playing split screen, which is more or less with a group but locally. And when I talk about this on streams, loads of people will tell me that yeah, they didn't really feel comfortable going to the end until they did it with a friend, and so having some content that is exactly like that is something that could lead us in that direction. But let's be honest, as a community, we're all having a little bit of cope on this, right? That we're all having a moment where we have to say, yes, we want the end update, but I think it's crucial, and the reason that I would say it's not a guarantee and we don't want it to be one is that we want Mojang to do the end update right. We don't just want to have brand new pretty biomes and content, we want to have content that actually means something and which actually has an impact years down the line. I would say great examples of this would come from the Warden or the Never update, or maybe you could even say the Village and Pillage system. I think that if Mojang wants to make the end update significant, they need to actually have the right ideas behind it. And here's a genuine thought experiment for you watching this video. What would you actually add to the end islands? I was going over there recently because you can't make custom biomes and add-ons for Minecraft, but I was working out and playing around with the idea of what could you actually add to make the end much better, and it's a real struggle because by the time you get to the end, you already have some of the most powerful stuff. Unless you speedrun to get there, you've got your maxed out gear, and so the only rewards they can offer you right now are the most powerful transportation and storage options. What could you offer in the rest of the end islands to make it not just worthwhile to explore, but also worthwhile to settle and to do things there? These are the hard questions, and it's something worth asking yourself. What do I actually want from an end update? Because ultimately, until you know the answer to that question, how will Mojang? And so let me know what your fun ideas are in the comments down below, and let me know if you think an end update is more or less likely, because for now, this video has been a lot of fun. I hope you all enjoyed seeing me put together my reconstruction of an end city, but in 2x scale, because I'll be completing it when I see you in the next one. Goodbye.